Hello, everyone. This is Melinda Russell with Racing Girls Rock, presented by the Women's Motorsports Network. And we are going to have a very interesting podcast today. And we're going to start by just letting our guest tell you a little bit about herself, her name, where she lives, her family, those kinds of things. And so we're going to get started. So take it away.
Hi, I'm Al. My company is Ignite Media, and I live in Orange County, California, with my husband and my 4-year-old daughter and our dog Teddy, and any other small animals that my daughter can try to sneak in the house. And and when I'm not traveling, that's where I am. But I feel like I'm traveling a lot.
You're traveling a lot. So let's talk about that. Why are you traveling? What is your business? Why are you involved in motorsports? And share with us, what do you do when you're traveling?
I work as a motorsports photographer. Whatever goes fast, I take pictures of it for the most part. And so I travel mostly with IndyCar and IMSA. I do some grassroots, some Red Bull has the craziest events, so they let me shoot some of those. So I end up traveling between January and November, and just kind of keeps me roaming mostly domestically, a little bit internationally.
Okay. So you have a 4-year-old daughter. How does that work? It's mostly weekends that you're gone, I would assume.
The racing's on the weekends,
Yeah.
but I usually end up leaving on Wednesdays or Thursdays. The last couple years been not so hard because it's sort of like she was super young, so it was like a more of an out of sight, out of mind
Right.
situation. But this year is my husband and I can already tell it's going to be a little bit harder. So it's a lot of FaceTime, or even like they watch the races when I'm at different races so that they can like look for me, which
Okay.
likes. And then I also will just try to do things that are special for her in between. Since I work for myself, when I'm home on weekdays, sometimes I can just, skip out on doing all the boring business stuff and give
Yes.
her a special day.
Right. And at 4 years old, she's starting to realize mommy's leaving, the suitcase is out, and then, yeah. And so she stays with your husband while you're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at least that part is good. But I know as they get older and the more aware they are, the harder it is for them to see you go, and harder for you too to walk away, because at 4 she's probably crying a little bit, or possibly.
Yeah, it's less of crying, more just of a guilt trip. So she's perfected that art already.
Okay, well, that's the girl thing in her, right? We women know how to do that, unfortunately, for the men in our lives. Yeah, for sure. And what is your daughter's name?
Jordan.
Okay, so we want to make sure Jordan gets her name out here on the podcast.
Yeah.
So Al, tell me, how did you get started being a motorsports photographer?
I went to school for photojournalism. And while I was at school, we kind of had to do projects, and I started doing some photography on the drifting side, which is like more of a non-traditional racing. And It was just starting out, which actually kind of worked to my benefit because I could go out, I had more access.
Mm-hmm.
I went to like the more grassroots drifting events for a chunk of time. I was able to learn how to shoot. And then after years and years, I shot a little bit for the Formula Drift series. I shot for a decent amount of like the teams, the manufacturers, and then shifted over to doing a little bit of drifting and other racing. And then eventually left shooting drifting to just mainly shoot the more traditional racing stuff. But starting on the grassroots side definitely helped me get more access and build up what I could, get access to.
Right, because you don't start at the top, do you? You don't walk into IndyCar and say, "Hey, I want to shoot your races." They're like, "Who are you and what's your experience?" I mean, that it's important, and so they're not going to let just anybody do it, because they have to know that it's you're professional and that you're going to do a good job. So, most of the time when I hear women they finally get to the pinnacle of the racing, whatever it might be, they've pretty much all started like you have. They started at the bottom, kind of, you started with drifting, like you said, and work your way up. And part of that is probably you met people and built relationships, I'm guessing, so that people then knew who you were.
Yep.
Yeah. That's kind of the normal how it goes, for sure. So tell me about who are you, like, we're going to talk about 2023. Where are you going to be going? What are you going to be shooting this year? And some exciting things that are going to be happening for you.
2023 is already happening.
Right.
We already had the Roar and the 24-hour, which was it's always one of my favorite events. It's a combination of just a crazy challenge, both physically and mentally. And that was awesome. And then we had the season opener for IndyCar at St. Pete.
Yeah.
There, I also shoot as the MX5 Cup series photographer. So they kept opening there also. So St. Pete was kind of crazy, and basically just all things IndyCar, most things IMSA. When there's overlaps, I have an amazing team that I work with where they'll cover where I can't be.
Okay.
And then as things start winding down around November, that's when more of like the Red Bull stuff will pick up. I do this event called Sand Scramble, which is in the sand dunes in Glamis, which is like 3 hours.
I've been through Glamis.
It's amazing. It is.
You cannot explain Glamis to anybody because it's so massive.
It is just miles and miles and miles of sand and epic lighting and just people doing cool things. And so that race, and then, a couple other things in between. And basically that rounds out my season.
Yeah. And you have about a month off and then you start over again.
Yeah. I think in December, I think there's one event in December and then everything starts all over again. Luckily, for the most part, there's no racing in February, which my daughter, her birthday's in February. So I will hopefully never miss her birthday. I think sometimes there's like a little bit of IndyCar testing, but I can, get that covered.
Right. Yeah. So that worked out. You planned that very well. That worked out really good for sure.
Fully planned. Absolutely.
Fully planned. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about Glamis just for a second. So my husband, we have a dune buggy. It's an older one. He actually built it, but he's all into that. And I'm not sure. You said you grew up in Ann Arbor, so you probably know what Silver Lake is, where the sand dunes are. And so that's where we used to always go and take the four-wheelers and the dune buggy. But he always wanted to see Glamis or go through Glamis. So we went to California a few years ago and we drove back through Glamis, and we stopped at the Glamis store, if you will. And it has no electricity. It runs on generators. It's full of everything you can imagine that a camp person would want. Plus, thousands of t-shirts, because you got to buy the t-shirt. Exactly. And a little 2-lane road that takes you, at least that's what we were on, this little 2-lane road, and it goes up and down and everything. And so we're driving my daughter's van, and we're driving, there's nobody. We've met no cars on that little road. And we're driving down the road, and all of a sudden it sounded like the van exploded. That's just the sound, the loud noise. And then we see 2 airplanes, like jets, military jets, fly, and they were flying very low over the top of us. And then they went this way, and then they dipped their wings at us. And I said, they probably thought it was a family with a bunch of little kids, and they were going to scare the crap out of all of us. And which they did, because you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing. And then all of a sudden this boom, excuse me. And so we had a good laugh about that. We called called my daughter and said, "We thought your van exploded, but it was actually these two jets that were giving us a scare." But that was actually really cool. And I'm guessing, there isn't much out there, and so it's probably a good practice place for those. I'm not sure where they would have been flying from, but anyway, so that was my experience with Glamis. And but I'd love to go to an event there. I know a couple other events that take place around or through there. And so do you have a motorhome? Do you camp, or what do you do when you go to all of these events? You stay in a hotel? What do you do?
Well, I haven't done a ton out there, although I would love to continue to do more and more. But a couple times I've stayed at a hotel that's about half an hour away. And then last year I was lucky enough to get to stay in an RV just right there. Hopefully do that again. But the people at Red Bull are amazing and set up everything, and I just showed up and had it all set up, and it's an awesome experience. Like, unlike a lot of the events I go to where it's just you show up and you go to the track and then you go to the hotel and then you go home.
Yeah.
It's an experience, and it's probably one of my absolute favorite events of the whole year, because you just don't, it's like organized chaos.
See, my husband would love that. And what time of year is that event held?
It is November.
Okay. Awesome.
I want to say.
Well, I'm going to have to check that out, because I assume they let people come to watch, spectators.
Yeah, there's a course that they built, and the only real way to see it is with the pylons. But because it's an open location, I think it's a park. I wish I could remember more about it. But basically, any of the fans can drive where they want to, and there's not tickets. You show up and you drive around and you get the best vantage points that you can. And it's super cool.
I bet it is cool. I'm going to have to check that out, because I've not heard of that. That's awesome. So how old were you when you started doing this? Like, how many years have you been when you started back with the drifting? You were out of college, so in your early 20s.
Yeah, I actually started shooting when I was in college. So
okay.
Still about early 20s.
Yeah.
And then basically this is all I know how to do.
Yeah. Well, it's not all. I mean, that's pretty impressive, because first of all, the equipment that you must have in order to get those shots, it's not your run of the mill camera. I know it has to be a very amazing technical equipment that you have. But what's your favorite part about doing this, being the photographer?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think mainly just being an observer, getting to see the moments, and capturing the moments.
Yeah. Yeah, because if not, they're gone forever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
right.
when I was in school, they would say, like, if you're watching the moment happen in front of you, you've already missed the moment. And so part of it is anticipating it, and then, just showcasing it and even like enhancing it. Like,
yes,
I think that's a lot of the fun. Like, I am definitely an introvert by nature. So getting to kind of hide and be an observer of all the people around me is a lot of fun. And I like to do that.
Yeah. And I would think that after years of doing it, you kind of become aware of when that moment's going to come. I mean, you can't always, the accidents and those kind of things, but there's probably times that I need to have my camera ready, because there's quite often a wreck at this turn, or these two guys are always battling each other, so I need the pictures of them, or what it might be. The more you cover a series or something, probably the more you know what you should be watching for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say like the on-track stuff is a lot more consistent. You kind of know what's going to happen. I don't really shoot a lot of crashes, mainly because I work for like editorial and more for manufacturers and drivers, and that's not the best day for them when that happens. So they don't really want that. But I think a lot more is knowing those moments and anticipating those moments in the pits and the paddock. And when drivers are getting in or getting ready, and as photographers, we watch drivers getting ready and getting in so
Mhm.
often that I think they would be shocked by how much we know their routines,
Uh-huh.
and how basically we can almost like we could mimic them. So we know when somebody's going to turn away or turn forwards, or how they're going to, put their balaclava on. So yeah, it's a lot of just kind of like learning people's mannerisms and using that to help you get better shots.
Now that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that, but even at the short tracks, one of my friends is a short track photographer here locally, and some of his photos that he takes that are my favorite are the ones that are in the pits. They're not the ones of them going around the track.
Mhm.
You can see hundreds of those shots, but it's the ones that make the driver more personal. Like my granddaughter has really long hair, and her putting her hair up in the helmet, or her and her dad looking at something on the car, whatever it might be. And those are my favorite because those really tell the story more so than the racing photography, actually.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, the racing photography, just on track stuff is super fun to get, and it's fun to kind of push yourself to get more unique styles and looks. But also, there we are at least still in the age that there are humans, driving the cars, and humans that are working on the cars to maximize their potential.
Right.
And I think we're almost doing a disservice by ignoring that fact.
I do too, because the behind the scenes really is the thing that people don't get to see. Like
Mhm.
if you're in the paddock or the pit area or wherever you might be, um, you know, there's a certain amount of people that get to do that, but the majority of the fans are not back there. And so they don't get to see everything that goes on. And that's true of racing in general. The most general fan buys their ticket, goes to the race, gets their food, goes up to their seat, sits down and watches all the pre-race stuff and the race, and then they go home. They don't get to go into the garage area or wherever the drivers are and see the interactions between drivers in the pit area or the garage area. They may be competitors on the track, but they might be laughing and enjoying time together when they're back there, and all the things that go on to get that car ready to go out. They don't see any of that, and I think that's such a shame because um, there's so much. It's so interesting, and there's so much to it
Mhm.
that people don't get. They don't understand, and so your photography probably helps show some of that for sure.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and I think, I mean, additionally, what's really great is now with social media,
Mhm.
drivers can choose to sort of show more about themselves than just driver in the car. They are whole people.
Right.
And to a degree, I think sometimes it's like when you're growing up and you see your teacher at the grocery store and they're like,
Uh-huh.
"Don't they live at the school?"
Yeah, exactly.
I
Oh,
think
they buy groceries just like my mom does.
exactly. I
Yeah, I
think that
know.
there's some of that degree for drivers where it's like, don't they just live, breathe, and are all controlled by racing, and it's just them in the car at all times. And all of a sudden, now with social media, you can see that they have days off and they're constantly developing, and they have a silly personality, or they're super into music, and I think my job is just to also go along with that, and to enhance that
Yeah.
look and that feel that drivers and teams are showing, that they are more than just the car going round and round and round.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think, Netflix has done a good job with, they did the Formula One,
Mhm.
series, which, I'll be honest, I really wasn't a Formula One fan, and that was probably my least one that I followed, I should say, because there's so many women involved in other types of racing, but not in Formula One. And so that wasn't something that I followed a lot, but I did watch that show. And now I have my favorite drivers, and I follow some podcasts that talk about it after, like after the race. And then, I've gotten way more interested in IndyCar as well, because for one, I'm in Kalamazoo. Indy's not that far away. And I went to my first Indy 500 last year, believe it or not. And I'm going to Nashville to the IndyCar race. And so will you be in Nashville?
That's actually an overlap for me with another event. So I would love to be in Nashville, but I have to see. If I'm not there, then I'll have my photographers there.
Yeah.
Nashville it's an experience. Like
yeah,
the racing is it's kind of crazy.
It is. So the very first year that they had an event there, I went to that race. My husband and I did. And then it was crazy. We stayed in a hotel that our room looked out over the bridge, and we saw them practicing and going across the bridge. And there were all these boats in the water around, the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really think about why. I figured it was people who owned boats and they were watching. Oh no, it was in case something happened and that car flipped over the bridge.
Yeah.
They were there for emergencies, which just kind of scared the heck out of me, because that would be terrible. But nothing like that happened, and it was a hotter than heck day, but it was amazing. And so that was our first official Indy race. And then last year I went with my cousins to the Indy 500 for the first time. And now this year, then I'm going back to Nashville as a volunteer. I'm going to volunteer at the race and do some media things there, which I'm really, really excited about. I can't wait to do that.
That's awesome.
So what's your favorite place to go?
It changes year to year and race to race, because to be honest, like my favorite place to go is where I get the best photos. So last year at VIR, I loved everything I shot. I think like you were saying about the Indy 500, like the energy there is like nothing else.
You can't explain it.
It's electric and vibrating, and so that's probably one of my favorite races, but visually is less exciting. So I'd say I'd be hard pressed to say what my favorite is.
Okay.
There's so many favorites, but for different reasons.
Yeah. And I've heard that VIR is beautiful.
Oh,
it's a beautiful track. Yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And the options for where you can shoot and the looks that you can get is almost endless.
Right. And that's I've got a lot of tracks on my bucket list, but that's one of them for sure. So definitely I'll be hitting that track up for some kind of a race at some point in, soon. But and so when you go, let's say that you're going to go race, or you're going to go shoot an Indy race, like in Nashville, they have other like types of vehicles that race as well. Do you just shoot Indy because that's who you like work for, you're contracted with, or is it for the whole weekend?
Well, I shoot for the whole weekend. In most series that I work with, IMSA, IndyCar, everybody else, there's support series there, and the majority of the time I'm shooting at least a couple people in those support series.
Okay.
So I'm shooting multiple practices, multiple qualifyings, multiple races, and it just kind of keeps you going nonstop. Again, that's where having second shooters or third shooters even to fill in those gaps makes a world of difference.
Oh yeah, because you can't begin to do it all, especially I'm just thinking about like even Nashville, it's such a big area, and I don't know how you'd be in the right place at the right time. You'd always feel like you were missing something. So yeah, extra shooters for sure.
Yes. I mean, street courses are the death of us. Like you can't really use vehicles. You can't really use a golf cart or a scooter to get around that much. And Nashville is just next level in how much walking there is.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And so yeah, I'm excited to go back because that was my very first Indy race. And so I was overwhelmed and excited and looking at everything. And now this year when I'm going to be a volunteer, I'll be pretty much in one spot for most of the time. So hopefully get to know the people that are going to be in that that area or whatever. And so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah. So when you go, do you cover just generally all the drivers, or do they say, we want you to focus on this driver and this driver?
So I work with, I have different contracts with different entities. I work with different manufacturers. I'll work with teams. I'll work with drivers. I'll work with sponsors within a team. And so basically that dictates who I'm shooting and what I'm shooting. I have, like on the IndyCar side, I have a team that I work for. And so I'm shooting all their drivers, all their on track, the candids, they have, special appearances,
right,
all that different stuff. And then on top of shooting nowadays, the biggest goal is the faster you can get stuff out, the better.
Yeah.
So we come off track after shooting a practice. There's an hour practice. You come off track, and the goal is to get images to your clients as fast as physically possible, so that they can put it up on social media, because things go stale so fast.
Right. So about how, let's say it's a normal practice. About how many photos would you take, and then how many would you have to go through and send to them?
It depends on how many clients I have. Depends on how many angles I'm trying for. I would say during a normal, like 1 hour, 45-minute practice between candids and on track, maybe like 1,000 photos.
Wow.
I know people that shoot a lot less, a lot more. It's basically just depends on your shooting style. And yeah, and then from that, I try for each client after each session. And again, it depends. Like if they are out for the whole session, I get more variety. If they're sitting in the pit lane for most of the time, I don't get a whole lot. And normally the people that are sitting in pit lane for most of the time and I don't get a lot will ask for more. And then I have to remind them that I can't shoot cars that aren't on the track. So they'll usually get between, I don't know, 10 and 30 shots after each session.
Okay. All right. So you quickly go through 1,000 shots, and I'm sure, and you're shooting very quickly when you're shooting those pictures, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm. And so, there'll be a whole row of them that are very similar, but one of them will stick out to you.
Right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So like if I'm doing something, like if I'm slow panning, it'll be pretty obvious. The ones that are blurry, they're not going to get those. They're going to get the sharp ones.
Right. Right. And I know this is going to be hard for you to answer, but I want you to do the best you can. When you find that shot that is just the one from the weekend or whatever, how does that make you feel?
It feels good, but to me, there's never the perfect shot. So there's even a shot that I feel like is great and I love it. There are always things when I look at it that I think I could do better or have improved on. So it feels good, but at the same time, I am always striving to do something a little bit better and a little bit more.
Yeah. But when to me, I owned a weekly newspaper years ago, and I was the editor, the advertising salesman, the photographer. I did it all. And I covered a lot of high school sports for our town. And I just remember that when I got that shot of a kid who didn't get to play much going up to make a basket or something, like that, it just made me feel like I've captured something for them that nobody else has done and that they'll keep forever. And that was my goal. I wasn't just to do that. Obviously, I was covering everything about the sports and that, but I just felt like that as a reporter, and that's kind of what a photographer is too. You're reporting in pictures. We give people something that nobody else can do. We write the story about their race. We take the pictures of them in action. And someday when they're not on the racetrack and they look back, hopefully they save a lot of those things, and they look back and they appreciate them, I would think, more later than they probably do in the moment.
Yeah, I would say that's true. To a degree, we're almost, what's the word? Just historians.
Yes, you're capturing history. Yeah, you absolutely are. And that's kind of a different way to look at it. And yet that really is what you're doing, because, now when you go back and they run promos on TV of the Daytona 500 or whatever, and they had the pictures of the older cars, video too, of the older cars racing down the beach, and that somebody captured that at some point. And so, somewhere down the road, Connor Daly's going to show pictures of him racing to his grandchildren, And so I love that part of media and what we do, because it's not just about social media and getting it out on there within a certain length of time, quickly, everything's so fast, but it's about preserving what happened for later generations, because there are a lot of people who love motorsports history, and you're a part of that. You're a part of making sure that that's captured. So I love that part about it. Yeah. Is there anything that's, what's the toughest thing about your job?
I think there's two things that I think of first. Well, one is managing expectations, and just making sure that the clients that I have are happy, and get everything that they need. But also, when there's things that get in my way or things outside of my control, realizing, or at least giving myself a break about it, but then also trying to relay that to them without making it seem like I'm not fulfilling my job.
Right.
I think the other thing is sometimes everybody that I know has an off weekend where I feel like I've been shooting for 5 million years sometimes, but I'll go to an event and just nothing is clicking. And it's usually tracks I've been to before. I have go-to locations, but I cannot get a shot in focus or looking nice to save my life. And I think it's kind of keeping it together and basically just pushing your way through those weekends whenever they pop up. That's definitely been hard to overcome in the past. When I was first starting out, I definitely, when those events would pop up, I would definitely get in my car and scream at the top of my lungs.
Yeah. Because, I can kind of see, so let's just say that you have a contract with the Smith Racing Team. And so is that who you're going to shoot all season long, or every race it's somebody different?
Yes, to both.
Okay.
I have clients that I shoot for all season long. Those I prefer those clients, basically because it's consistent. For me, the income I know is consistent, and then also you're building that relationship with the teams or the drivers, and so that they know you're always there. You're less of an outsider, and so you get a little bit more of those more intimate photos.
Right.
But then there's also, teams, drivers, what have you, that will pop up, and then I just have it for those one events or two events.
Yeah. Because I was kind of thinking, so if you had the same team all year long, there'd be pluses and minuses. And you already said one of them is that you become a part of the team. And so you're walking around taking pictures and they're not thinking anything about it. And they probably don't even see you half the time because they're used to seeing you at the race. They're doing what they're doing, and you taking pictures is just in the background. And so that gives you, like you said, that gives you a chance to get really up close and more intimate, personal kind of shots. Whereas the other side of that, though, is that it might get a little stale once in a while because you're taking pictures of the same people week after week after month. And like you said, they put their helmet on the same way, they do this the same way. And so your photos start to take on a similarity to what you took the last time. Would you say that's true, or it's always different?
No, my goal is that's actually a challenge that I absolutely love, is trying to each time look for something different, shoot a little bit different, find a different moment or a different location or different lighting. So they might be doing the same thing, but I'm trying for something new. There's always new things to shoot through. There's always different backgrounds. There's not really, I try to keep away from the ability for things to get stale or get redundant. Especially like on the MX5 Cup side, when I'm shooting candids, I love these drivers because they're always out. You can always shoot them. They're talking to each other. They are available. And so with the photographers I work with, I joke, it's like shooting fish in a barrel because I'm shooting for everybody in the series. So whatever they're doing, I get to shoot them. So it's always new and it's always different.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest, what you were saying is you get it, you become part of the team and you become familiar. The only slight downside is becoming so familiar. So on MX5 Cup, I've been shooting for them for a really long time. And I know a lot of the people even personally. So I will get kind of distracted because I want to talk to everybody or people talk to me. On the plus side, when people see me and I'm kind of honing in on something happening, I'm like, oh, I got to go. I got to shoot this. Yeah. But you do get a little bit distracted because you just want to talk to people.
So let's talk about that series just for a minute. Or first I was thinking, are there a lot of women photographers or are you a rarity?
On the IMSA side, I think right now there's 2 full-time photographers and 1 full-time videographer. On the IndyCar side, I don't believe there's any full-time photographers. One of my second shooters, her name's Amy Lentz. She's now hard-carded through me and is shooting for the full season. So she's the other one now, and she's an amazing up-and-coming photographer. So she would be the other one.
Okay. So they're part of your team for sure.
Yeah.
So now let's go back to the MX5. I know there's women that drive in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember. I do so many interviews, Al. It's embarrassing to say. I interviewed somebody that drives in that series, and I cannot think who it was.
Was it Heather Hadley?
Yes, Heather the Heat Hadley. That's it.
Oh, she's awesome.
She is amazing, isn't she?
Yes, she has personality up the yin yang. She's like a decent driver, super focused, but not just like head in the game, just not noticing anything around her. Like she's a good person. Yeah, she really is. And I followed her I started the Women's Motorsports Network in the fall of 2017. And I followed her probably since 2018. She's one that popped up, right away. And so I followed her, and yes, so we did a podcast with her not that long ago. And I was excited to see that she was going to be in that series and race. And so next time you see her, you tell her that we had a conversation. That'll be very cool. Yeah. But there's other women in that series too, aren't there? I think she's the main one that's running the full season
series. Yeah.
But there are other women that
come and go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So what have I not asked you about your business, about what you do? Because, I interview a lot of drivers, a lot of other types of occupations, but I think you might be my first photographer. So what have I not talked to you about that I should have, so that we can know more about what you do?
can't think of anything.
So the photos that you take, they're the property then of the client that you
Uh,
shoot for, or do you post pictures anywhere that people could follow and like if I wanted to see if you had any pictures of Heather, I could look and see, oh, there's Heather, or whatever.
yeah. So I don't just post all my photos anywhere like a gallery.
Uh-huh.
I post on Instagram, and I'm starting TikTok. But people can see sort of like my favorites of the weekend on Instagram.
Okay.
And then the majority of the time, yeah, my photos, they go to more so clients because I don't really have time to go through and
No.
upload images, like everything from the weekend.
Yeah.
But you can click on the Mazda site, you can look on Andretti,
Yeah.
you can
Okay. Yeah. So for a weekend, you probably shoot 10,000 photos.
I shoot a lot of photos. It's a
I
lot
can't
of,
even imagine that many. To me, that would be overwhelming to go back home. And then what do you do? Okay, you go home after the race and you've got 10,000 photos. What do you do with them? What's your process after that?
well, if I'm doing my job right, I don't have 10,000 photos once I get home. So basically,
Okay.
after each session, I'm culling through the photos that I took after that session, delivering shots to each of the clients. Each evening, I'm going through the rest of the images from that day, delivering all of those. And in the best case scenario, I'm doing that after each day. So by the time I get to the end of the weekend, I'm basically done, or
Okay.
just editing through special appearances, or if I had to go shoot a party or something like that.
Okay.
And so those photos are usually going out, hour by hour, day by day in the evening.
Okay. That makes
So
sense. Yeah.
for drivers, when they're done with their stints or done driving for the day, they'll usually do a debrief, and spend time doing that. And I'm assuming then they get the rest of their evenings.
Mhm.
But for photographers, when the race ends or practice ends, basically our jobs are just starting, because
Yeah.
then we have to start the whole editing process, post processing,
Yeah.
uploading galleries, dealing with emails, all that stuff.
So is there a lot of editing? I mean, I know you use, I'm sure, very expensive, high quality equipment. Is there a lot of editing, and what would be some things that you would edit? I know that's a big question, but like
I mean,
people
I
that are in the background, or you take them out? What do you do? Or
no,
lighting?
I
No.
mean, the main thing, so I shoot raw, which basically means that it's my job to color correct, add
Okay.
in contrast, I'll add in um, saturation, things like that.
Okay.
So when I'm editing, if I do my job right, it should literally just be doing the bare minimum. Um,
Okay.
Sometimes I'm shooting in tricky lighting like situations, so I have to bring up shadows or bring down highlights, things like that.
Okay.
But for the most part, I almost never will edit out people out of the background or
Yeah.
take cars out or things like that, because I don't really have enough time.
Well,
And
and that's part of the experience. That photo, if you take stuff out, then it's not really what the photo was.
yeah, well, and also because I have the ability to move around when I'm shooting. So again,
Yeah.
if I'm doing my job right while I'm shooting, if there's something that's messy in the background,
You
I'm
move.
either standing up or lying down or sitting down, or
Right.
crouching and cleaning it up that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. So my last question for you, Al, is if a somebody came up to you, man or woman, with their child, teenager maybe, and they said, I see that you're a motorsports photographer. Would that be a good role, good occupation for my daughter to, pursue? She loves taking photos. What would be your response?
Um, I mean, I love what I do, so I would say yes. But I mean, I've gotten to the point where I can, make a decent living, and I get to shoot awesome stuff. But
Hmm.
there's a lot that goes into it, and so you have to kind of be ready to work a little hard and hear a lot of no's, and, you know, have many disappointing days and even many days where you feel like you're unstoppable. And then the next day you're, you know, crying on the floor.
Be away from your family, lots of travel.
It's a lot of travel, but it's not boring.
No, I would think it would be every race is a new opportunity, because no two races are ever the same.
Mm-hmm.
You may be at the same track that you were at last year, and a lot of the drivers might be the same, but the action is not going to be the same. It's always going to be new and fresh. And so you always have that excitement about, what am I going to see today? What am I going to capture today?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do today that's different or better or more exciting than what I've done before? And to me, that's like when I go to a NASCAR race or a short track race, and it's somewhere maybe I haven't been before. I'm always thinking, who am I going to meet today that I can do a story about? You
Mm-hmm.
know, who am I going to be able to celebrate and connect with somebody else that I know from this racetrack? And so that's the excitement. It's not always even the actual race. For me, when I go, it's more about the people. Who am I going to meet? Who am I going to get to talk to? What am I going to get to film, interview, ask questions, etc. And so I'm thinking that's pretty much where you are too when you go to these events.
Oh yeah, it's a combination of feeling like I'm with this small, weird family of people that I travel with constantly and love being around them. But then also just the, you know, insane amount, like you said, the possibilities, the endless possibilities that I can create, and see what comes out of the weekend.
Right. Yeah. What fun. Well, I'm going to have you send me your schedule of where you think you're going to be, because I'm going to try to hit some races this year at some tracks that I haven't been to. So normally I would have been in Phoenix this past weekend because my daughters live there. One of my daughters is in Florida for the month watching preseason baseball because her husband coached a young man who plays for the Cardinals. And so they're in Florida for spring training for a month. Excuse me. My other daughter was not going to be around either. So I chose not to go to Phoenix because I want to go to Bristol or Talladega or somewhere I haven't been before. And so, you know, that's the excitement for me, is seeing where am I going to get to go and who am I going to get to meet, and that. One thing I didn't ask you though, and I'm interested in about this. Were you a motorsports fan before you started taking photos of motorsports?
No.
Had you ever been to races or anything, or no?
Yeah, I'd been to races. I didn't grow up watching a lot of racing. I was into it. But I think when I started going more and more and seeing the possibilities of what I could shoot,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of built it out. So I'd say I was into racing, but not like a crazy
Okay.
fan.
So when you were in college though, and you were studying, did you think that maybe that's what you wanted to shoot, or were you open to just whatever came around?
I didn't know what I wanted to shoot when I was in college, but when I started going to more of these events, I realized that was what I wanted to shoot.
Okay.
It was just energy and visuals, and it's amazing. It's never boring.
No, I'm sure it's never boring, because even the action in the garage or the paddock area is never boring. So you just never know who you're going to get to see or meet. So I love that part.
Yeah.
Well, Al, is there anything else that you would like to share that I don't want to leave out before we hang up today?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. How about social media? Well, if somebody had some questions or wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Oh yeah. If they just want to message me, I'm on Instagram, Ignite Media Photo. That's the name of my company.
Okay.
And so yeah, if they send me any messages, it's a great way to get to me.
Okay. So message her at Ignite Media Photo on Instagram. And if you have any questions or you're interested in knowing how to get involved to be a motorsports photographer, I think Al's going to be your best response, best person to talk to, because she's done it for a while and she started at the bottom and she worked her way up to where now she's shooting 2 of the top series in motorsports. And so I'm excited for you, Al. I'm excited that we got to touch base and I got to meet you, and I appreciate the time that you took today. I know you weren't gone over the weekend because there wasn't any racing, right?
No, I got a weekend at home and it was amazing.
Yeah, because I keep track of all that, and so I knew there was no racing. But I appreciate your time of doing this, and if I can ever do anything to help you or promote you or share what you're doing, all you have to do is reach out. I'd be happy to help.
And thanks for having me on. This was fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hang on, don't